The Google Pixel 2 is coming out pretty soon, and I think that now it's a pretty good time to do an ultimate camera comparison between the iPhone 8 Plus and the Google Pixel XL. And this is probably the world's most in-depth camera comparison between these two devices that anyone has ever done. So in this video, I'll be testing not 5, not 10, but almost 20 different camera test scenarios. So everything from panorama shots, 4K video recording at different resolutions, bitrate comparison, and nighttime shots with and without flash, stabilization recording, and pretty much everything you need to know in terms of the cameras of these two phones is tested in this video. And then also all the shots that you're going to see in this video are taken on full auto mode. So I haven't adjusted the focus or the exposure manually, and none of these shots have any color correction applied or any adjustments applied in post. And then I've also exported the shots straight from each device at the original quality. So I haven't used iCloud or Google Photos to transfer these photos. So everything is non-compressed, so to say, uncompressed. And also be sure to watch this video in 4K if you can at 60 frames per second. So tap that gear icon and switch to 60 frames per second, especially since the iPhone 8 can do 60 frames per second 4K video. So that's the only way you can tell the difference when it comes to smoothness. But yeah, other than that, grab some snacks and enjoy the ultimate camera review between the iPhone 8 Plus and the Google Pixel XL. Okay, so first off, I just want to start off with the specs. So on the iPhone 8, we have a 12 megapixel sensor on a back-facing camera versus 12.3 on the Google Pixel XL. And then when it comes to the aperture, we have f1.8 aperture on the iPhone 8 versus f2.0 aperture on the Google Pixel XL. And then on the iPhone 8, we also have optical image stabilization on the back-facing camera. Whereas on the Google Pixel, we only have EIS or electronic image stabilization. So when it comes to the video on the back-facing camera, we have 4K 60 on the iPhone 8, and then 1080p 240 as slow motion. And then on the Google Pixel, we have 4K 30 and 720p 240. When it comes to the front-facing camera, we have the same video recording resolution, so 1080p 30 frames per second on both. And now speaking of the front-facing camera, the iPhone 8 has a 7 megapixel sensor, f2.2 aperture, pretty much the same one as on the iPhone 7. And then the Google Pixel XL has an 8 megapixel sensor and f2.4 aperture. So the reason why I mentioned the specs is because judging from all the specs alone, the results should be like this. The iPhone 8 should be better when it comes to video, but the Google Pixel XL should be better when it comes to, well, I don't know, the front-facing camera should be a tiny bit better when it comes to sharpness, but other than that, even low light, the iPhone 8 should be better because it has optical image stabilization and a larger aperture. But then the Pixel actually has a larger sensor, by the way. Okay, so taking a look at this first image with a boat, in this one, the iPhone 8 is so much brighter than the Google Pixel XL. And it's not just the brightness of the photo, but also the color. So the colors themselves are also much more vibrant on the iPhone 8 versus the Google Pixel. On the iPhone 8, there's also a lot more sharpening that's going on in the image. So for example, if you take a look at the ground next to the boat, this wood here is so much sharper on the iPhone 8 versus the Google Pixel. But then if you take a look at the clouds actually look better on the Pixel than the iPhone 8. So the iPhone kind of blew out the clouds quite a bit. And then if you take a look at the zoomed in grid here, the iPhone 8 is indeed sharper, but in this one, I think I actually prefer the Pixel because everything looks less processed, so the lines are smoother. And I don't know, let me know in the comments which one would you actually pick in this regard. Then this next photo is pretty interesting because it kind of has everything that you need. So bright areas in the sky, dark areas beneath the trees, so lots of colors, and this one is actually pretty tricky for these phones to master. And whoa, take a look at that HDR on the Google Pixel. Now that's HDR. Everything, all the detail in the photo is retained. The trees are as green as they should be. The sky is as blue as it should be. The iPhone 8 one is a bit brighter and you get a bit more detail in the shadows, but the right hand side of the image, as you can see, is just way too bright on the iPhone. So you do lose quite a bit of detail in the clouds. Whereas the Google Pixel actually handles this perfectly. Then this next photo is actually perfect for an HDR shot because you have lots of sky, but at the same time you have enough colors, enough shadows, and also enough sharp textures such as the tree leaves and the pavement. And in this one, the iPhone 8 retains much more detail. But the iPhone 8 also has a much more cooler tint versus the Pixel, which actually has a more warmer tint in this one. Now, if you take a look at the trees on the left-hand side, they're actually much more in focus on the iPhone versus on the Pixel. But then if you take a look at the shadows, for example, the iPhone 8 feels way too sharp. There's just too much processing going on. You get those weird lines here, artifacts, so to say. on the iPhone 8. Now, if you take a look at the sky is darker, but also more blown out on the Pixel, especially this cloud. The iPhone 8, on the other hand, is actually brighter. It has a brighter sky, but this one is actually perfectly exposed. So for this image, the iPhone 8 definitely takes this one. Next up, let's take a look at a couple of macro shots. Now, these were taken as closely as possible to the subject, so I haven't used the telephoto lens on the iPhone 8 Plus. So in this one, for example, the Pixel is so much sharper if you take a look at the symbol in the middle. And then the iPhone 8 actually has better colors. So they're much more vibrant than the Pixel in this case. But then if you take a look at the left-hand side of the image, it's sharper on the iPhone 8. So it seems that they actually got the focus quite a bit differently. Now, the second image was actually a pretty difficult shot to take because the light was coming from behind the tree. And in this case, the Pixel has a much more uniform exposure. But the iPhone 8, if you take a look at the iPhone 8 image, this one definitely retained much more detail, at least when it comes to the tree. And if you take a look at the sky, the Pixel XL retained much more detail in that case. So overall, I would say that the Pixel definitely wins here. And then number 3, iPhone 8 is so much more contrasty than the Pixel if you take a look at this one. So I would honestly pick the Pixel in this case because it's much more natural and much more closer to real life. But then the iPhone 8 is pretty much how I would actually edit this image into. So the Pixel is also sharper if you take a look at the ground on the top left corner of the image. Let me know in the comments which one of these two would you actually pick in this case. Now, next up, I want to do a test with the optical zoom. So we have optical zoom 2x on the iPhone 8 Plus versus digital zoom on the Google Pixel XL. So obviously the iPhone 8 Plus is sharper in this case, but when it comes to the general picture quality and the dynamic range, the iPhone 8 wins in this one because it has a much more well-exposed image, especially if you take a look at the sky. Now, moving on to a couple of low-light shots. So in this first one, if you take a look at the sky, the iPhone 8 definitely wins here because you don't get as much noise as on the Google Pixel. But then the Google Pixel has a much better image when it comes to the overall sharpness. So the ground is sharper on the Pixel, the building in the front is also sharper on the Pixel, but then the building on the right is also sharper on the Pixel, but actually has more noise than the iPhone one. Now, taking a look at the second image, in this one, there's a massive difference here. So with no optical image stabilization, the Google Pixel XL has a pretty blurry image, and there's also a ton of noise in the sky. And the colors on the iPhone are so much better and much more vibrant than the Google Pixel. So the iPhone 8 definitely takes this one in sharpness, color, and overall look. Now, moving on to the third image, this one is a low light shot of some buildings, and you also have a canal here. So it's pretty good because you can see the reflection of the buildings in the water. Now, in this one, there's a lot of noise on the Google Pixel, again, because of no optical image stabilization, so everything is so much sharper on the iPhone 8 Plus. But the Pixel is brighter indeed, but it also adds a ton of noise. So let me know in the comments which one you prefer, but in this case, the iPhone 8 Plus definitely wins this one. Next up, moving on to a couple of low light shots taken with a flash. So in this one, and the first one, the iPhone 8 is just so much better than the Google Pixel XL, and that's actually because of the slow sync flash. So if you take a look at the iPhone, it doesn't actually look as if you took this photo with the flash on the iPhone. But then the Google Pixel one doesn't look that bad either. So it's definitely much more balanced than the Samsung Galaxy S8 image, which was immediately noticeable that it was taken with a flash. Now, if you take a look at the noise is a lot more noticeable on the Pixel, and everything, the building, everything is so much sharper on the iPhone 8. Now, taking a look at the second image taken with a flash and low light, in this one, the iPhone 8 has a significantly more warmer tint with a flash, whereas the Pixel actually has a really cold tint in this one. Now, in reality, the view was actually sort of like in between those two. Now, when it comes to the noise, again, the Pixel has a lot more noise if you take a look at the sky, and in terms of overall sharpness, the iPhone 8 wins here in this one as well. So if you take a look at a truck and the building in the background on the left hand side, it's so much sharper on the iPhone 8 versus the Google Pixel XL. Moving on to the next one, in this one, it's pretty much the same story as the previous image. So the Pixel one is way too cold, whereas the iPhone one is way too warm. So for some reason, the Pixel wasn't really in focus in this image when you compare it with the iPhone, which is actually perfectly in focus. But then on the Pixel, you do get to see much more detail because the flash has a much longer range in this shot. Next up, I want to take a look at some videos taken with a back-facing camera. So I want to test out the dynamic range on both. The iPhone 8 records in 60 frames per second 4K, whereas the Google Pixel records in 30 frames per second 4K. And the Pixel is just way too dark. So if you take a look at those buildings, you'll lose a ton of detail on those houses there. So overall, when it comes to the dynamic range and fluidity wise, since the iPhone 8 is 60 frames per second, it definitely takes this one. And speaking of 60 frames per second, I just want to do a quick video, a quick test to see what's the difference in terms of 60, 30, and also to test out the camera rolling shutter. So in this one, the Pixel is actually doing really well. As you can see, there's almost no jelly effect. With even 30 frames per second, whereas if you take a look at the iPhone 8, even though it's 60 frames per second and it should be more fluid, there's a lot of jelly effect on the iPhone 8. So overall, the Pixel definitely takes this one. Okay, now moving on to the stabilization. Whoa, I was really impressed in this one. So just take a look at the Pixel. This one has the best stabilization from all the phones that I've tested in 4K at least. And the thing is, it doesn't even have OIS or optical image stabilization, such as, the iPhone. The iPhone 8 Plus does have OIS. The Pixel XL only uses EIS or electronic image stabilization, so basically the gyroscope inside the phone, that's the one that tells it to remove the shake. And as you can see, there's no warping effect like on the iPhone 8 or even the Samsung Galaxy S8, so everything feels so smooth. I'm actually really impressed. I wasn't expecting this. And keep in mind, this is in 4K, so I'm really impressed with the Pixel XL. And now I want to do the same thing but in 1080p, and that's because the iPhone 8 it does support a much better stabilization, so digital stabilization or cinematic stabilization in 1080p, whereas this one actually isn't working in 4K 60. So 1080p on both, and in this one the Pixel just wins again by a mile. I mean, just take a look at this. There's zero distortion on the Pixel versus the iPhone 8, which interesting enough has, a ton of jelly effects. So this is a bit weird. Hopefully this would be improved in a future software update, because on the iPhone 8 Plus at the moment, this is just terrible. But the Google Pixel again wins stabilization in 1080p just as 4K. Next up, I want to test out the autofocusing speed. So they're both pretty much the same. I think the Pixel is a tiny bit quicker than the iPhone 8 Plus, but then the Pixel does have this weird thing here in which it keeps trying to find the focus, which obviously isn't the case with the iPhone 8, so kind of needs to calibrate before finding the focus. So yeah, in this case, the iPhone 8 actually takes this one. Now moving on to some slow motion. So both of these phones record in 240 frames per second. So the iPhone 8 can actually do 1080p, whereas the Google Pixel can only do 720p. Now, interesting enough, the Google Pixel actually exports a slow motion video at 30 frames per second, but then the iPhone 8 actually exports it at 240, so then you can edit it in post if you wish. And taking a look at the image, sharpness wise, yes, the iPhone 8 is a tiny bit sharper because it's 1080p, but still there's not that much of a difference, to be honest. So they both look really bad, I would say. They feel like 720p or maybe even 480p upscaled. But yeah, the iPhone 8 is a tiny bit better. Next up, we have this low light video taken with a back-facing camera. I've actually recorded this with the iPhone 8 in 30 frames per second because, it's better in low light. You have a lower shutter speed. So I would say that the Pixel 2 has this weird shake if you take a look at the Pixel 2, but it's also brighter, and that's because of the bumped up ISO, which results in a ton of noise, as you can see. So the iPhone 8 definitely wins in this one. Okay, moving on to the front-facing camera. So we have a picture taken with a front-facing camera, and in this one, the Pixel 2 definitely takes this one. So as you can see, every single cloud detail is preserved here. The iPhone 8 completely blew out the sky. And it's not just that, but the Pixel is also sharper. So if you zoom in on my face, well, you can definitely see that the Pixel wins here by a mile. But it does crush the blacks on my shirt, so there's that. Okay, so this is a front-facing camera test of the iPhone 8 Plus versus the Google Pixel XL. Not the XL, not a Pixel 2. The Pixel 1. So just take a look at the colors behind me. By the way, this is the audio coming from the iPhone 8 Plus, and now this is the audio coming from the iPhone 7 Plus. So take a look at the bushes behind me, the leaves, the green, and everything. I think the Pixel, from what I can see, looks way better than the iPhone 8 Plus. But let me know in the comments which one you guys think looks better, color-wise, exposure-wise, and when it comes to the highlights. Yeah, definitely the Pixel, I think. Let me know in the comments. Now, taking a look at the low light photo taken with a front-facing camera, well, both of these photos are really bad. Maybe the Pixel is a tiny bit better because you can see much more detail in the buildings behind me, and everything is also brighter on the Pixel. And yeah, there's also much more noise in the iPhone 8 image, so I would say that a Pixel takes this one, but yeah, they're both really bad. And now this one is a low light photo taken with a flash this time. And as you can see in this one, the Pixel definitely wins here. It's much brighter, but it does have a much more cooler tint versus the warmer one that we have on the iPhone 8. But yeah, overall, you can see much more detail on the Pixel, so the Pixel definitely takes the second low light shot as well. Okay, so this is a front-facing camera test in low light between the iPhone 8 Plus and the Google Pixel XL. Let me know in the comments which one you think looks better. I think the Google Pixel XL definitely has a more a warmer tint, I would say, versus the iPhone 8 Plus, which kind of has a more colder tint. If you take a look at the noise in the sky, the Pixel XL is much more noisier. But overall, if you take a look at my face, I think it looks much brighter on the Pixel XL than on the iPhone 8 Plus. Let me know in the comments which one do you think is better when it comes to front-facing camera in low light. And finally, moving on to some panorama shots. So in this one, this is the Google Pixel one, and this is the iPhone 8 Plus one. Now, the iPhone 8 Plus one is 29 megapixels in size, and the Google Pixel XL one is 14 megapixels in size, so half the size, which is pretty interesting. Now, if you take a look at the stitching, they're both really, really bad. So if you take a look at this building, well, the iPhone 8 did a really bad job, but then the Pixel did an even worse job. And same thing applies to the stairs. So the iPhone 8 does do a better job here. You don't get me wrong. I mean, they're both really, really bad stitching wise, but yeah, the Pixel seems to be a bit worse when it comes to the stairs. Now, if you take a look at the exposure and overall detail and the dynamic range, the iPhone 8 definitely wins here. So the Pixel crushed the blacks, whereas the iPhone 8 retained most of the details in the clouds and the buildings and everything. Okay, now when it comes to the 4K video recording bitrate, the iPhone 8 in 4K 60, it's about 106 megabits per second. On the Pixel XL, that's about 42, I think, megabits per second, but that's in 4K 30. So in 4K 30 on the iPhone 8 Plus, it's about 50. So bitrate wise, it's about the same, a tiny bit better on the iPhone 8 Plus. Okay, so in the end, both of these phones have a really, really good camera. I was honestly surprised to see how good the camera on the Google Pixel actually was, even a year after it's been released. And I mean, in the end, they both have their ups and their downs. So for example, if you care about video, especially with a back-facing camera, the iPhone 8 Plus is a much, much better choice. But if you care about selfies, then the Google Pixel is actually a better choice. But then if you care about low light, the iPhone 8 wins here. And if you care about panorama, the iPhone 8 also wins here. So in the end, you have to do a couple of trade-offs for each device. The Google Pixel has better HDR processing when it comes to the actual colors and vibrancy and shadows, but the iPhone 8 retains more detail. So let me know in the comments overall, which one would you actually pick when it comes to the camera? And also be sure to subscribe if you want to see more extremely in-depth ultimate camera comparisons like this one. Speaking of camera comparisons, I've also done one with the iPhone 8 Plus versus the Samsung Galaxy S8 Plus and the iPhone 8 Plus versus the iPhone 7 Plus. So definitely check those videos out if you want to see how the iPhone 8 Plus stacks up to different phones. And then also, if you're into the channel, enable notifications so that you're notified whenever a brand new video comes out. Feel free to give this video a like if you enjoyed it, so let me know. It took a pretty long time to make, so every feedback is really, really appreciated. But yeah, other than that, this was pretty much it. So thank you for watching, especially to those of you who made it until the end, by the way. I'm Daniel, and see you guys in my next one. Son of Tech, signing out. Cheers.